Have you ever felt like a stranger in your own home? I have. After spending just 3 weeks caring for a dying friend, I returned to find my world unrecognizable. The furniture I had chosen with love was gone, family photographs vanished as if my memories never mattered. And on the door to my own bedroom hung a note, hastily scribbled, "Storage for junk." But the real cruelty. It wasn't strangers who did this. It was my own son, and the woman he married. In that moment, something inside me hardened. I swore they would regret underestimating me. My name is Margaret Hayes. I am a widow in my early 60s, and for most of my life, I believed I understood what family meant. My husband, Daniel, passed away nearly 10 years ago, but the home he left behind was more than just walls and a roof. It was a vessel of our love, a keeper of decades of laughter, hardships, and memories we carved together. Every corner of that house whispered a story, our story. From the rose bushes Daniel planted in the garden, to the old rocking chair on the porch where we used to sip coffee at sunrise, everything carried his presence. I wasn't wealthy, but I had stability. That house was my pride, my safety net, and the one place in the world where I still felt Daniel beside me. And then there was my son, Brian, my only child. I raised him through sleepless nights, sacrificed when money was tight, and gave him every ounce of love I had left to give. When he married Clara, I welcomed her with open arms. She was charming at first, polished, confident, and always smiling in front of me. I truly thought Brian had chosen well. After all, isn't that what every mother hopes for? That her child will find happiness, even when she herself has already lost her greatest love. But time has a cruel way of revealing people. As the years went by, I noticed subtle changes. Brian became more distant, his visits shorter, his tone sharper. Clara, on the other hand, grew bolder in her suggestions. "You should think about downsizing, Margaret," she would say with that polite smile. Or, "This house must be a lot for you to manage at your age." She cloaked her words as concern, but I could hear the edge beneath them, the hunger. At first, I dismissed it. I told myself I was being too sensitive, that perhaps she was just trying to help. But a mother knows when something is wrong. I saw the way Clara's eyes lingered on Daniel's study, where he kept old investments and legal papers. I noticed how Brian avoided conversations about the future, as though he were hiding something. And I began to feel a quiet unease. Still, I never imagined how far they would go. I never imagined that the very people I raised and embraced would dare to erase me from my own life. But that was before the note on my door, before the betrayal unfolded in full. That was before I understood the truth. My home, my memories, my very dignity were nothing more than obstacles in their way. And I, Margaret Hayes, was about to discover just how dangerous it is to underestimate a widow with nothing left to lose. When I returned home after 3 weeks of caring for my old friend in her final days, I expected warmth, familiarity, and the comfort of stepping back into the world Daniel and I had built together. Instead, I froze in the doorway, breath caught in my chest. The house I walked into was not my home. The curtains Daniel had chosen, the ones with soft floral prints we had picked out together on our 20th anniversary, were gone. In their place hung sleek, sterile drapes that looked as though they belonged in a cold hotel lobby. The oak dining table, worn smooth by years of family dinners and endless conversations, had vanished, replaced by a glass-topped monstrosity that seemed to mock every memory I had once cherished. The framed photographs of Daniel and me, the milestones of our life, had disappeared. Even the rocking chair on the porch had been tossed aside, as if it were nothing but junk. My heart pounded as I stepped further inside, the silence pressing against me. It felt like trespassing into a stranger's home. And then I saw them, Brian and Clara, sitting comfortably on the new sofa, as though nothing were amiss. Brian's face remained unreadable, his eyes glued to the television, while Clara barely glanced up, her lips curved into a faint smirk. "Clara, what happened here?" I managed to whisper, my voice trembling. "Oh, Margaret," she replied sweetly, as if she were speaking to a child. The house needed an update. You'll get used to it. Used to it. Used to my life being erased piece by piece? I turned to Brian, my son, the boy I had raised, the man who once clung to me after nightmares. Brian, I pleaded, how could you let her do this? But he said nothing. His silence was louder than any words could have been. That night, I lay awake in the hollow shell of my room, the walls stripped of familiarity. And then I heard it, the sound of laughter drifting up from downstairs. I crept to the landing, my heart sinking with each step, and that's when I caught Clara's voice, sharp and venomous, carried easily through the house. "This place is finally mine," she boasted to her friends, her tone dripping with triumph. "The old woman is just a stubborn shadow clinging on. But not for long. I'll get rid of her soon enough." The words pierced me deeper than any blade could. But what cut even more was Brian's silence. He was there, sitting beside her, hearing every cruel word. And he said nothing. No protest. No defense. Just silence. In that moment, my heart cracked open. The betrayal was complete. My son, my flesh and blood, had chosen comfort over loyalty, greed over love. I clutched the stair railing, my knees trembling, as the truth solidified in my chest. I was not just unwanted in my own home, I was already being written out of it. But what Clara didn't know, what Brian had forgotten, was that a woman who has lost everything has nothing left to fear. And that night, I swore silently to myself, if they wanted a battle, they would get one. That night, I cried until my pillow was damp, my body trembling with the weight of betrayal. But as the hours passed, a flicker of Daniel's voice rose in my memory, clear as if he were beside me again. "If the day ever comes when your own family turns against you, trust that I've prepared a way out." I clung to those words like a lifeline. Daniel had always been a man of foresight, a protector, and I knew in my heart that he would never leave me defenseless. The next morning, after wiping the tears from my face, I began searching. I combed through drawers, flipped through old books, checked the attic where dust covered boxes of forgotten keepsakes. 4 hours. Nothing. And then, in the back of my wardrobe, beneath an old quilt, I discovered a small wooden box. Its surface was worn, its corners chipped, but the moment my fingers touched it, I felt Daniel's presence. With trembling hands, I lifted the lid. Inside lay a tiny brass key, delicate yet firm, and a folded piece of paper yellowed with time. My heart raced as I opened it. In Daniel's handwriting, firm and unmistakable, were the words, "This key will unlock the door to justice." Tears welled again, but this time they were different. Tears of hope. The next day, I followed the trail. The key belonged to a safety deposit box at a bank Daniel had used for decades. My palms were slick with sweat as I signed the papers and waited for the clerk to return. And then it was placed before me, a simple metal box, unassuming to anyone else, but to me, it felt like holding a weapon forged for survival. Inside lay documents, neatly arranged and secured. At the top was a sealed envelope addressed to me. My fingers shook as I broke it open. Daniel's letter was short, but powerful. "Margaret, if you are reading this, it means life has tested you in the cruelest of ways. This will is not just about wealth, it is about dignity. Should you ever be treated unjustly in your own home, know that everything I leave behind belongs solely to you. No son, no daughter-in-law, no outsider has the right to take what we built together. This is your shield, your voice, and your justice." Beneath the letter was the official will, signed and notarized. The words confirmed what Daniel had promised. In the event that I faced mistreatment, all assets, including the house, savings, and investments, would transfer exclusively to me, bypassing every other heir. I pressed the papers to my chest, my tears falling freely. Daniel hadn't abandoned me. Even in death, he had stood guard, anticipating the cruelty I now endured. That night, while Clara boasted to her friends downstairs and Brian sat silently by her side, I sat at my desk, studying the documents under the lamplight. The weight of betrayal was still raw, but now it was mixed with something stronger, resolve. They thought I was powerless. They thought I was a weak, grieving widow clinging to memories. But they were wrong. Daniel had given me not only protection, but a weapon that could change everything. And as I folded the will carefully back into its envelope, I whispered to myself, "The game has only just begun." I knew that emotion alone would not save me. Tears and pleas could be dismissed, twisted, or ignored. What I needed was proof, undeniable, irrefutable evidence of their cruelty. So I began quietly, carefully. Each time Clara spat her venom at me, mocking my age, sneering at my frailty, calling me a burden, I pressed record on a small device tucked into my apron pocket. And each time Brian stood by, silent, watching with cold detachment as if I were nothing more than an inconvenience, I captured that silence too. Because silence, in the face of cruelty, is complicity. It wasn't enough to have words on tape. I wanted witnesses. One night, after Clara forced me to sleep on the couch again, insisting that old people didn't deserve real beds, I called my neighbor, Mrs. Peterson. She had known Daniel for years, had shared tea with me countless afternoons. With a heavy heart, she came by, pretending to return a borrowed dish. When she stepped inside, she saw it with her own eyes. Me curled on the sofa, a thin blanket pulled to my chin, while Clara and Brian laughed in the kitchen. Mrs. Peterson said nothing then, but her look told me everything. I had an ally. Piece by piece, I built my case. By the time I walked into my lawyer's office, my handbag felt heavier than usual, not from weight, but from the gravity of what it carried. I laid out the recordings, the witness statements, and finally, Daniel's secret will. My lawyer, Mr. Green, a man with silver hair and sharp eyes, examined everything quietly. Then he looked at me, his mouth curling into a confident smile. "Mrs. Hayes," he said firmly, "justice isn't just coming. It's already here. Prepare yourself. The day they pay for this will arrive sooner than you think." And he was right. It came in the form of a family gathering. Clara had orchestrated it, inviting a few relatives under the guise of celebrating their new ownership of the Hayes house. I sat in the corner, quiet, my hands folded in my lap, while Clara bragged loudly, her voice dripping with triumph. Brian, as always, stood behind her, a shadow, nodding along. "Of course," Clara said, lifting her glass of wine, "this house is ours now. Margaret should be grateful we're even letting her stay here at all." Laughter rippled across the room. My heart pounded, but my face remained calm. Then, slowly, deliberately, I rose to my feet. The room fell silent. Without a word, I placed a thick envelope onto the table. Its sound against the polished wood echoed like a gavel. I pressed play on my recorder, and Clara's own voice filled the room, harsh and cruel. "You're nothing but dead weight, Margaret. This house is mine now." Then came Brian's silence, his failure to defend me, captured in damning stillness. The relatives shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting between us. Clara's face drained of color. Finally, I slid Daniel's will across the table, the embossed seal glinting under the chandelier. My voice was steady, cold, and slow, each word slicing through the silence. "The only people unwelcome in this house are you." The room froze. Clara's mouth opened, but no words came. Brian's shoulders slumped, shame finally flickering across his face. For the first time in months, I felt Daniel's strength flowing through me. I was no longer the fragile widow they thought they could crush. I was Margaret Hayes, and this was my home. Clara's face turned ashen, the color draining from her cheeks as if every ounce of arrogance had been ripped away. Her lips trembled, but no sound came out. Brian, usually so smug in his silence, fumbled for words, stammering like a child caught in a lie. Then, with perfect timing, Mr. Green stepped forward. He took the will from the table, adjusted his glasses, and cleared his throat. "I have reviewed this document myself," he announced to the room, his voice firm and steady. It is valid, legally binding, and leaves the Hayes estate solely to Mrs. Margaret Hayes. Clara Whitmore and Brian Hayes have no claim whatsoever. Effective immediately, their supposed rights to this property are null and void. The finality of his words struck like a hammer. Clara gasped, shaking her head in disbelief. "No, that can't be right," Daniel promised, but her voice cracked, and her eyes darted wildly around the room, searching for someone, anyone, to take her side. No one did. Brian sank into his chair, his face pale, his hands clutching the edge of the table as though it might keep him from collapsing. For once, there was no bravado, no defense, only shame written in every line of his posture. The relatives, who had laughed along with Clara moments earlier, now avoided her gaze, whispering behind their hands. The tide had turned, and they all knew it. In that instant, Clara and Brian lost far more than a house. They lost their dignity, their standing in the family, and any shred of respect they had tried to command. They had exposed themselves for what they truly were, parasites, feeding on cruelty until the truth dragged them into the light. But I was free. In the weeks that followed, I made my decision. I sold the house, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Every corner of that grand old place still held Daniel's memory, but it also carried the stain of Clara's sneers and Brian's silence. I needed a fresh start. With the money, I bought a modest apartment in a quiet part of town. It wasn't as large or impressive as the Hayes estate, but it was mine, truly mine. No one could take it from me. No one could make me feel unwelcome within my own walls. For the first time in years, I slept soundly, without fear of being banished to a couch. But I couldn't stop there. Too many women like me were still suffering. Mothers, widows, grandmothers cast aside by their own blood. I used a portion of the money to establish the Hayes Foundation, a small but powerful fund dedicated to supporting older women abandoned by their families. If I could ease even a fraction of their pain, then Daniel's legacy, and my own survival, would mean something greater. Standing at the ribbon-cutting ceremony months later, I felt tears sting my eyes. Not from sadness, but from triumph. I had not only reclaimed my home, my voice, and my dignity, I had transformed my suffering into hope for others. As for Clara and Brian, their downfall was swift and merciless. Their reputations in the community collapsed. Friends turned away, whispers followed them wherever they went. In the end, they were left with nothing but the bitter taste of their own betrayal. And me. I walked forward with my head high, knowing I had won, not with cruelty but with truth. Because in the end, revenge wasn't about destroying them. It was about reclaiming myself. I had finally done it. I had my freedom. I had my voice. And most importantly, I had my pride. This story isn't only about revenge, it's about reclaiming dignity. Too often, those closest to us think they can define our worth, silence our voices, or strip away our place in the world. But no matter how long it takes, justice finds its way when we refuse to break. If you believe in standing up for yourself, share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you fight back, or walk away stronger?